Today we're going to talk about the ever popular bench press. Keep in mind the following before we get into technique talk. I consider the bench press a great upper body power exercise and a mediocre chest exercise. So what I'm going to show you aren't necessarily bodybuilding techniques for the bench press, because I think there are better ways to develop your chest. It is a good choice of an exercise to develop your chest, but there are better choices. The bench press is a compound exercise and should not be used to try and isolate your pecs in any way. A lot of muscle comes into play in the bench press, and because it's so popular, almost everyone performs it in the gym, but a lot of people do it wrong. So hopefully what I'm going to show you today will extend your training time without injury and help you lift more weight. When I teach the bench press, I teach what I consider an athletic version of the bench press. Powerlifters will often take a very wide grip because you're trying to make the stroke as short as possible. The less distance you have to move a bar, the more efficient you can be and you can lift more weight. That's great if you're just trying to lift the most weight possible, and especially if you're wearing something like a bench shirt, which can aid in poundages. But when you're trying to work as much muscle as possible, you want a longer range of motion. That being said, one of the primary issues I see is people naturally take too wide of a grip. When the bar comes down, we want it to hit below the nipples, somewhere in this region. And what that means is that your elbows will travel in and they won't rotate out until near the top. This makes sense from even a biomechanical perspective. When you push someone, or you're pass blocking or something, or you throw a punch, no one throws a punch like this with their elbow out. You throw it in here and then you rotate out. So why would we train in a method like this, where in real life we're never going to push someone like that? That also brings the bar up higher on the chest. And unless you're doing, there is a lift called the clavicular bench, but unless you're doing something specialized, even bringing your arms back here without weight will be uncomfortable if you're trying to get an invisible bar to here. But you can much easier get a longer range of motion by bringing them in lower. This is one of the reasons people have shoulder problems from bench press. They're bench pressing the wrong way. There are a lot of pec tears because of bench press, but if you're using proper technique, the pectorals shouldn't be stressed to a point where it breaks. And this is an important point that people can misinterpret when they're looking into bodybuilding techniques. A wider grip and elbows out will put more stress on the pectorals, but just because a muscle is stressed does not mean that that's a good thing. A muscle can be stressed to the point where the attachment breaks or the muscle itself rips. So we're not looking to overstress any muscle, we want to stress things just enough. That's the whole point of resistance training. So your grip should be narrow enough that you can allow your elbows to travel in comfortably, and you can get some contact eventually with your tricep and your lats. This helps drive off at the bottom of the bench press. So I'm going to show you the grip I use. I'm 6'1", and my grip is maybe a little narrow for someone my height, but it's what's worked out for me the best over years. I've bench pressed wide, I've bench pressed narrow. This is the one that for my body works best. For your body, everyone's grip is going to be a little different. Now keep in mind, when I talk about where the bar should go, some of you have been benching like this your entire lives. It's very uncomfortable to switch gears and start benching with a different bar path. But if you take your time and do it, you will save your shoulders in the long run and hopefully be able to use more weight. But at first, you're going to have to sacrifice weight and find a very uncomfortable technique, uncomfortable at first. It's become popular these days to stop before you reach your chest. But in my mind, if that's necessary for you for some medical reason, you shouldn't even be doing the bench press. It'd be strange to do curls where you only come down halfway all the time. So if you're stopping yourself without touching your chest, why are you doing bench press? You must be hurt in some way, or someone told you that's a safer way to do it, but if that's the case, just do a different exercise. Your feet should be planted on the ground, and you want to have a slight arch in your back because you want pressure on your upper back. It's just like if your back was against a wall and you had to push an object, you're going to brace yourself with your legs and push yourself back into the wall so you have more force against the object you're pushing. We're trying to do the same thing on bench. Again, this is a compound lift. This is not an isolation movement. So what you're going to do is put an arch in your back, bringing your scapula together when you're on the bench, and you're going to have enough pressure, enough push with your legs that you're driving your upper back down so you can use that as a brace when you push the bar up. It just makes sense if you think about it from a practical standpoint. So when people are benching with their feet up, unless they have some kind of medical issue again, and their elbows out, it's just, that's not how the body works. And you're stressing the body in a way it doesn't want to be stressed. So eventually something's going to give. There are a lot of different resources for proper setup on the bench press, so we're not going to go into too much detail on that. But one issue is that people set up too high. It's more comfortable to lift the bar off the rack from here, but then you run into the risk of hitting the hooks. Or if the bench you're using has a lot of space there, they'll lift it from here, not considering that the bar could hit here with the path the bar takes. So this is where a spotter comes in, because I prefer to have the bar lined up with your forehead or your eyes. So you should be a little bit lower than some of you might be comfortable. So I'm going to tuck my scapula and get my back really tight against the bench and keep my legs to a point where if I push, I'm kind of pushing myself down into the bench as opposed to just back. So there should be some pressure on my upper back. For myself, I prefer a grip somewhere between here, which is for me about a thumb's length away from where the knurling starts, to here, which is the pinky on the outside ring. That's the region that works best for me at my height. If you're a little shorter, you might be in a little bit more narrow. So when I take the bar out, I try to make sure I have the muscles in my back contracted, and I'm putting a little torque on the bar, almost like you're trying to bend the bar or pull it apart, depending on how you would describe that feeling. So once it's over, as we discussed, I'm not going to bench like this. You can see that looks kind of unnatural with my arms directly under the bar and the bar hitting mid-chest. However, if I just let it fall in a natural path, I'm not even trying to pull my elbows in or anything. This is just the way humans are supposed to move. This hits below my chest and in a spot where you can see my lats are starting to touch my triceps. And if the weight was heavy, I could use that for some of the initial drive to push the bar up. If I take a very wide grip, I can still pull my elbows in, but it shortens the stroke. And again, for the point of athletics, there's very few sports where you would ever push with your hands this wide. For the point of powerlifting, it could be useful, depending on how you're built, especially if you have a very big barrel chest, because then you have a very short range of motion for the bar. But to work as much muscle possible, you want a more moderate grip on the bar. This was a very general look at the bench press. There are a lot of technique differences that people have. And again, you might be lifting for a certain sport or something where your technique might be slightly different. But keep these principles in mind. And if something hurts, don't do it. Even if you love the bench press and all your friends do it, if it bothers your shoulders, don't bench. It's okay. But try these techniques, moving your hand in, find a more natural bar path, and you might find that you can still do the lift. You've just been doing it improperly for years.